After a lacklustre performance against the Bears, Knights fans could be forgiven for expecting some changes, but few would have predicted the decision to persevere with front rower Dave Woods at the expense of returning Kangaroo Mark Sargent. It's a tribute to the club's depth that players like Sargent and star second rower Tony Butterfield can be allowed to languish in the minor grades for even 1 week.
Well, it's mainly the limitation in regards to their training. Mark Sargent hasn't had a lot of football this year, and we'd like to see him play a bit of regular football. Tony has had the last couple of days laid up a bit. He had an injection in his knee after the North Sydney match, which restricted him for the last couple of days, so he hasn't trained as well.
The first grade side is a familiar one, with the backline unchanged, although don't be surprised to see Ashley Gordon shuffled around the paddock during the match. The selectors continue to show faith in Steve Linnane in preference to reserve grade skipper Steve Fulmer, while in the forwards Mike McLean returns from State of Origin duties and Paul Harrigan gets his chance in the second row. As far as wingers John Schuster and Tony Kemp are concerned, the Knights are savouring their presence until Kiwi Test duty calls. The club will go through the motions of making a protest, but is resigned to losing the pair for 5 weeks during the New Zealand representative season.
Well, it is. It's part of the requirements of a New Zealand player playing in our competition, is that he's available to play for his country at any time that that country's in a test.
Bruce Mackenzie, NBN News.
In the Hunter, Labor leader Bob Carr got back to the party's grassroots, meeting with miners at the Newstand mine at Fassifern. Minerals and Energy Minister Pickard had officially banned the opposition leader from the site, but Mr Carr was undeterred. Mr Carr told the miners 2 Newcom and 7 Elcom mines would be sold by a Greiner government, paying off a $1.8 billion deficit.
What you're looking at is if the Greiner government gets returned, nothing less than a fire sale of government assets.
Mr Carr says if the mines are sold off, 500 jobs will go in the Hunter. But he could give no rock-solid guarantee for workers under Labor. If the mines don't produce, the fat will be trimmed. Elcom mines would be maintained under Labor but corporatised under a separate management. Mr Carr was given an understandably favourable hearing.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, as an employee of Elcom Mines, he's the saviour of our bacon.
It's the opposition leader's second visit to the area since the election was announced. Party spokespeople admit the Hunter is seen as vital to Labor's chances on May 25th. Peter Ryan, NBN News. It seems incredibly unjust. While coastal centres are getting good constant rain, in the valley the drought is only biting deeper.
Well, it seems to be just staying along the coastal fringe, in fact, and maybe following some of the mountain lines along for, 5 or 10 kilometres inland, but that's about as far as it's going.
At Tocal College near Patterson, the irrigation systems are working flat out. Tocal has had little more than a spit of rain. It's a similar story around the valley. Dungog and Gloucester getting a slight drizzle. Today, Scone had 3 millimetres, Singleton just 1. While weather tipsters see the change as a positive break in climatic conditions, it's also brought on cooler temperatures, making any pasture growth difficult. There is certainly little optimism for farmers. Tonight's weather forecast: showers on the coast.
The station wagon carrying a family of 3 was headed north when it collided with a 4-wheel drive utility. The station wagon took the brunt of the impact on the driver's side. An elderly man behind the wheel died instantly. His wife and son remained trapped in the wreck. The driver of the ute suffered minor injuries. The crash happened at 6:30 near the Ballakira Channel outside a 60km/h roadworks zone. Terry Edwards was working nearby.
I bolted down there to see if I could do anything. Bloke in the driver's side, he was dead. The bloke was trapped on the other side, and I helped the old lady out and we laid her down on the side of the road, and the other bloke in the 4-wheel drive just got out and was sitting on the side of the road.
The trapped man was released by rescuers. The injured were taken to the John Hunter and Mater hospitals, where they remain in satisfactory condition.
The enforcement will cover everything from buses and railways to ferry services and public car parks and platforms in the Hornsby, Gosford and Newcastle districts, but the focus of patrols will be the railways. The real trouble periods are on the late night runs when young revellers begin the journey home, according to Transit Police Constable Merv Harris.
Mostly it's alcohol related. We find that once some of these people have been to the various venues in town, they come back to ride home with alcohol on them, and then they become problems.
Transit police say surveys show that travellers are afraid or uneasy on public transport, often without justification. The high-profile operation is simply to let the passengers know that police are on the job, even if they're not always visible.
The whole purpose of the exercise really is to allay those fears in the minds of the travelling public and to engender a feeling of safety and security when they are travelling.
Transit police believe the local anxieties really stem from problems in the Sydney area, and travellers certainly support that view.
Yeah, it's late at night certainly, particularly in the western suburbs of Sydney, but recently I think it's improved a lot.
There was a few times when I used to go to Sydney over night time. It's a bit scary then. I think around on the North Sydney trains that way, but not on the trains around here.
Operation Feel Safe will conclude at 2 o'clock on Sunday morning. Tom Hilston, NBN News.
The dispute at the CRA-owned operations escalated last Wednesday when 3 workers were sacked for alleged misconduct. The next morning, the entire workforce at the Howick Open Cut and the Howick and Udell washeries went out in support. On Monday, the owners of the mine sacked the entire workforce, claiming the mine was losing money and was uncompetitive because work practices weren't being changed. The matter was urgently listed before the Coal Industry Tribunal in Sydney. After 2 days of hearings, Tribunal David Duncan has ordered that the 3 men originally laid off be reinstated as soon as possible with no loss of pay. He describes their dismissal as harsh and unconscionable. Mr Duncan has also ordered that the other 300 workers be reinstated from tonight onwards. The dispute, he says, over changing work practices is to be addressed by the local coal authority. Although Mr Duncan complied with all requests from the mining unions over the issue, he does so with a clear warning. Referring to a previous case, he says one more occurrence like Monday's could well be sufficient to tip the scale towards a conclusion that a dismissal was entirely justified. A spokesperson from the company confirmed late this afternoon that the men would be reinstated. He said the company welcomed recognition from the tribunal that the mine can't continue operating at a loss. As to the long-term future, he said the owners would be watching events carefully to determine the mine's viability. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
The Chamber's President, David Lamarchant, says there's enormous potential for Hunter businesses to win frigates work, but they can't afford to sit back and wait for it to fall into their laps. With this in mind, the Chamber has proposed the coming together of the Private Enterprise Group and the Government's Business and Consumer Affairs Agency, or BACA. Mr Lamarchant asserts that both groups have a role to play in helping local businesses cover their bases when tendering for frigates work.
BACA obviously has a leading role in being a coordinator, being able to bring people to this area as a government body. Chamber has, I think in this instance, a very supporting role of BACA's initiative, that is encouraging through our members and wider field people to come and listen and be aware of what Amacon requires.
The Chamber is seeking to meet with the agency next week and will encourage an Amacon representative to also attend.
What we're trying to do is to ensure that as many people as possible out there are aware of the opportunities that should come our way.
For the first time in their lives, these 3 young men are enjoying a decent night's sleep. Until last weekend, 16-year-olds Michael Allen of Cardiff and Jared Panola of Rathmines and 22-year-old William Boney of Maitland had to sleep in uncomfortable positions, lying on their side, feet propped up and even sitting all night in a lounge chair. William has a heart condition and the other 2 boys suffer from muscular dystrophy.
Rough night. Couldn't sleep on all other normal, but I could sleep on a real good.
The boys' mothers appealed to Bill Smith from the Awabakal Disability Services Group about 3 months ago for special medical beds to be provided. The New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council then came to the party with a $13,000 grant. For Michael, the bed's delivery gave him a double delight. It was his birthday.
It's just more comfortable because I couldn't sit up properly because my lungs and they had a sore back.
With control of the bed's reclining, massage and leverage facilities at their fingertips, the boys say their dreams have never been sweeter.
With this new bed, I don't need mum or dad to come and sort of lift me around. They only have to come and help me sometimes move onto my side. And it's really good.
The Cessnock Business District has suffered a decline in popularity over the years. Competition from large modern shopping complexes in other lower Hunter centres have drained 50% of potential customers, and the ageing city streets are not enough to attract new business.
The commerce of Cessnock is something of a paradox in that as well as losing 50% of our spending, that's resident spending, we also have a semi-captive market of 600,000 visitors who come to the vineyards each year. So I think one of the main target markets will be that 600,000 people, very few of whom seem to stop and spend money in Cessnock, due largely to its presentation and the image it projects for visitors.
According to the Council's strategic planner Ken Phelan, the heavy traffic taking a shortcut between Mulberry and Branxton through Vincent Street is also an increasing problem.
They're a threat to anybody who wants to use the centre, be they motorists or pedestrians. Also during wet weather or very dry weather they create dust and dirty spray which the shopkeepers will complain about.
The proposal on display at the City Library is the blueprint for a facelift. The streets will be lined with trees, there will be more pedestrian crossings and speed humps to discourage heavy vehicles. A green town square will be built to link Rotary Park, Charlton Street and council offices. If adopted, it will be a 10-year program, with council encouraging store owners to update their properties in line with the revitalisation. The plan will be on display for 6 weeks, and the public has been invited to participate by submitting their own suggestions.
You know, they have a board. Very crude instruments to make it, and very deadly. And this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Well, that would be one of our concerns, that the people who are in the courtroom are not going to be getting justice, that the courts are going to be getting even.
As soon as the last tenants moved out of Latex House in 1987, the homeless moved in. For the past 4 years, the deserted building in Hunter Street has been home for squatters, with about 20 staying there at any one time. The demand for emergency housing has prompted Graham Gordon, the superintendent of the City Mission, to propose a proper shelter for up to 50 people be set up on the building's first 2 floors.
If we can use it to house people in a safe environment, in a clean environment, we're going to be doing a service to the city and a service to the people that are actually living there.
Mr Gordon says he's been talking with Latec House's owner, Sydney millionaire Theo Morris, who was willing to give the mission a 12-month lease. While the mission sent off a development application to Mr Morris today, the council forwarded a notice demanding the building be secured. Health and Building Services Director Harold Stewart says if the owner doesn't board up Latec House, council will within 2 weeks.
But I think if the mission puts in a firm proposal to council with supporting documentation from the owner, and it's a proposal that council can deal with, we would consider a short deferral of the work.
When this building was opened in 1959, it was considered one of the most prestigious in Newcastle. Today, it is quite literally a wreck. The windows are kicked in, blood is splattered on the walls, and graffiti with messages like "Trust kills" and "The revenge of the street kids." The mission's Graham Gordon says even if council boards up Latec House, the homeless won't disappear.
I guess if it's closed up, people will go somewhere else or they'll find somewhere else to stay.
Scott Bevan, NBN News.
The police took a leaf out of the politician's book today, pounding the pavements and pressing the flesh as they let the public know about the new beat policing program. Seven officers have been allotted specific areas within the Shire where they'll patrol on a regular basis.
It goes back to the old style of policing where people used to walk on the beat and they knew everyone in their area. And we would hope that the people would seek out the police, and now that they know them, treat them as a friend, and that way we'll build up some sort of intelligence on the whole area.
Wyong is seen by many as one of the quieter areas on the Central Coast, and that's just how the police want it to stay.
There are the normal street offences that occur in just about every area, and that will be our prime aims, to reduce street crime.
Newcastle University students believe their transport and accommodation problems have reached crisis level. Tired of waiting for politicians to help out, they have come up with their own plan which could help solve both problems. They want a railway station built here at the back of the university to allow trains travelling between Newcastle and Maitland to service the campus.
We're here today to protest, to say that we want a train station at the University of Newcastle.
Cars are parking on our footpaths now. All the buses are overcrowded. A train would help alleviate that.
The ease of access to outlying areas would also encourage students to live in places like Beresfield and Maitland, helping to alleviate the accommodation crisis in Newcastle. To show just how serious they are, students this afternoon forced this passenger train to make an unscheduled stop. Expecting trouble, State Rail had around 6 officials on the 3-carriage train. Although students were threatened with arrest, they see the issue as one worth fighting for.
We've got a rail line going through the back door, but we can't get a station.
Also causing concern among students is a plan by the university to introduce parking fees similar to that at the John Hunter Hospital. A spokesperson from the university today confirmed that parking charges are being looked at as a way of easing congestion, but students say it's not on.
If that was imposed, it would certainly overcrowd the buses even more. It's even more reason to have a station here.